Hey, how's it going? Just wanted to make a observational video and a reminder video, I suppose. If you take a look behind me, you notice all those people that made sure that we would all have our freedom and we wouldn't be taken over by tyrannical governments or broken generations that have forgotten what has happened. Because there's a couple things I do want to say, and I think it's really sad and dystopian-like to see how the younger generations just are. And it's kind of strange because, I'm still a young person. I feel young and look young, and who am I to talk about younger generations? But I never thought there would be so much of a disconnect between just a few years. And I don't want to call anyone stupid, but I think the more accurate term would be ignorant, because there's such a vast difference between when I grew up and a few years later with the generations preceding me. And to help clarify and put things into perspective, I was born of the age where I happened to see and live through pretty much the birth of, the home video game generation, home computers, the internet, advancements of digital media, digital devices. I was around essentially before all those things, and I watched the entire evolution of these things. And it helped me get a good grasp of where things were heading and where things were going. And I'm someone who loves, sci-fi movies and sci-fi books and technology and stuff like that. But I've grown to despise the media and pop culture because I've seen the bigger context in which it stands, and how growing up I seemed to watch all these corporations emerge with a stranglehold of all these factors. And it was very alarming even when I was a young child. And as much as stuff that I love, when I grew up, things like Speak and Spell came out, and that was a marvel. You can type something in and then it kind of, says the word and helps you spell things. And old video games that were just like black and green, Game Boy, like the original one, Nintendo, the very, very beginning. So I've witnessed every single thing that these young people, 20 and younger, have witnessed, plus more, 15 years more. And a lot of them don't understand the gigantic leaps and bounds that they have come, and the advancements of psychology, and how all these things can be used to benefit the people pushing them and the people that are already in the positions who create them. Everything is, a tool, and there's a proper and improper way to use things. And when people don't have limits, or people don't know their limits, they can become easily abused and used for the wrong reasons. And you see it now, the societal reflection of all these things that have manifest. And for instance, one thing that really comes to mind is the electronic devices like phones and smartphones. And one of the things too, when I was growing up, when calculators really came out, like electronic and digital and solar calculators came out, teachers always taught you, how to do math and how to do these equations without them. And they always said stuff like, oh, you're not going to have one in your pocket. And young people today laugh at that because they have their cell phone. But what happens when their battery runs out? They become useless. And, you end up having conversations with younger people and they're trying to fact check you using their phone. Meanwhile, they can't think about it critically on their own. They become so dependent on these things and they don't even realize how dependent they are. And corporations know these things. They understand that these devices are input devices that essentially input information into the brain. And now you have, every generation rebels to some degree. That's how people grow into a sense of independence and individualism and become, not dependent on their guardians or parents anymore. And they end up progressing into the world and becoming self-sufficient. Those are vital steps. However, they're not becoming that way. They're becoming dependent on something else entirely. And that's like, the internet and what these phones give them access to. People don't even remember, people's individual cell phone numbers or telephone numbers. I remember growing up, I had to memorize all my friends' numbers in my head. I still have some of them just locked away, and every once in a while they'll just pop up as a number in my head. And I'll be like, oh yeah, him or her. And then I'll think about them and think about a lot of things, how they were. And not growing up being dependent on all of these technological devices not only helped build my imagination and helped me see things from another perspective, but it also, I think, helped to instill independence and to not be so grounded in artificial things. And it's a really interesting thing because a lot of the younger people, they act like they're so smart and they will try to ridicule you, but you can just lap circles around their head and they'll just go, no, and then they'll just try to start to insult you because they run out of things to say, especially if they can't read an article quick enough in that time. And you're starting to see the dependency on all these corporate entities and technocrats. And it's really sad because now you have the rebellious youth who think they're rebelling, but they're really just repeating slogans from all these major corporations. They'll be like, oh, Amazon is bullshit. They have, a control over everything. And then the next, day, they're literally repeating those slogans and saying, no, this is how you do it. It's BLM, LTGB, and all this stuff, but it's all being crammed inside their head by these corporations. So now they're becoming like the child of these technocrat corporations, and they think they're rebelling against the system, but they couldn't be any more part of the system. And it's really this kind of strange dystopian sci-fi comedy we're living in. And the only thing that is even worse is the fact that it really would be funny if it was a movie and not reality. And it's really sad to see what's going on. It's you see how much of puppets that these young people are, and it makes you wonder about the future generations. I can have a conversation with somebody, a deep conversation about all sorts of things without ever looking at my phone once. There's only a few times throughout the day where I even need to look at my phone. People are forgetting the art of, reading books and the art of research to the point where, they have memes that, oh, you can't do research unless you, and then they put this whole list of stuff. It's like, well, first of all, did you do any of that? No. And you're telling me? I grew up in that world. So yes, I do research. I read things. I save things. I write notes. I take notes. When you got to try to do some like detective work and like dig deep into what's going on. And then the lack of history that's understood by the younger people is really alarming too, because not only are they repeating the slogans, but these slogans are all like communistic and socialistic and Marxist and all these things that are terrible, you know? The Nazis were socialists. Communism is another form of socialism. Marxism is another form of socialism. And people are forgetting how important freedom is, to the point where they get triggered by words like freedom. Like, freedom is a bad thing. You having the option to do what you want is a bad thing. You being dependent on everyone else because you're not independent is a good thing. It's so absurd where it's scary. You're starting to see the manipulation that of the psychology that they have over the psyche of all these young people. And they think they're doing something rebellious and bold and cool, but it's the complete opposite. You're just standing in line like a robot. You're being a drone with all these pre-programmed notions in your mind. It's the opposite of having control over your life, to the point where having control over their lives becomes too scary for them. The whole concept of, having an apartment or paying bills or buying your own home or investing or, constructing hobbies that can make you successful and support a family and have a stable life becomes scary to them. It's like seeing what's going on in North Korea, where people don't know how to think independently, where it's just so scary that it hurts their brain. They're like, people don't have decisions pre-made for me, then how am I supposed to do anything? It's like, that's what's scary. I think a lot of these young people don't realize how beautiful and empowering it is to be able to make your own decisions and not be dependent on other people. When people are not used to what's going on, and these should be such simple things, I would try to relate it to, playing a musical instrument. I know not everyone does. And I know most people don't really play an instrument or have some sort of constructive hobby, but it's one of those things where, it seems so daunting and scary to even try to approach it. But once you do, it starts becoming second nature, and you don't even have to really think about it too much. You can just sit there and have a conversation playing music and thinking, and sometimes it helps you think even more deeply into what's going on. It really jogs the mind in so many ways. I sit down with a guitar or a bass or instrument of different types, and when I sit there and start playing, I start remembering dreams that I've had. I can tell my brain is being jump-started in so many different ways, where people that don't do that don't understand, and it becomes a scary thing where it's like, oh, it's going to take so long. I'd rather not. I'd rather, someone just do it for me. And you can relate that to anything in your life, going to the store and shopping and knowing what to buy and knowing, where to go and memorize the aisles of where things are. For some people, that's still a daunting thing, when it's like, that's just part of everyday life. And it should be. It's like, the more you use your mind and the more you use your brain, the easier it is to do that. And the stronger your mind becomes. And you start memorizing things much easier. And there's so much strength in that, where it's kind of scary that people don't even want to attempt that. They'd rather just be homeless and live on the streets in terrible conditions and freeze at night and inject heroin to forget what they're doing, because it seems like such an easy thing, but it's like, that's just causing so much more misery in your life and making you so lazy that you don't even want to attempt anything else, that you'd rather shiver and not know the bigger picture than, to attempt to do something better. It's so dystopian and it's so scary that it's working. A lot of these kids and younger people have been brainwashed since they were kids by, schools and by cartoons. The amount of subliminal stuff I've seen in cartoons is insane. And it's easy for me to pick up, I think, sometimes because I'm an artist and I understand those concepts. I understand how you can sneak images into other images and patterns, and how patterns make people feel a certain way. Even certain patterns can make people feel disgust, or they can make people feel happy. There's psychology in literally everything around us, and every single thing in our environment impacts our mind in some way. If you're wise enough to know how to take hold of those things, you can start making people feel certain ways. You can start making people feel queasy or uneasy with just certain colors and color patterns and schemes, and to the point where they don't even know it. They don't even know why a movie or a cartoon is making them feel anxious or strange or happy or not. But it's all there in programming. And that's another scary thing is realizing how many people don't understand how much control other people can have over your mind. These are real things. These aren't just like made up concepts. These are actually real concepts that have weight and validity to them. Anything that can be made by somebody came from the mind because they felt a certain way. So that same exact thing can be imposed on somebody else. And people that understand the mind and psychology use that to their advantage. And this consists of anything from television shows and movies and graphics and art and media of any kind, music. When people become masters of their craft, there's a reason why other people become in awe to it, because to them it's something unobtainable in a lot of ways. And that is part of the allure as well. And that's part of the psychology and part of the programming. These are all real things. And it's really sad and scary to see how detached a lot of the younger generation are, to where they think that all the things they're doing and just going along with what the corporations and the establishment tell them. When I was younger and when my parents were younger, it was, anti-establishment, because we saw how destructive that the establishment can be and how controlling they can be. And we warned about these days that are here now. And we understood that they were going to have total control over the minds of people at one point. And look what's happening right now. All these young people that are, hating the police and hating their families and trying to get into this world of escapism because they just can't deal with the world, and they don't even understand their own biology and sexuality, to where they can just be molded at a whim and over time by all these media conglomerates and technocrats. It should be extremely alarming. And it even was for when I was a young kid. I understood, I stopped watching TV when I was 15 for a reason. I started seeing all the drug commercials they had from all these big pharmaceutical companies, and they try to convince you using all this artwork and all the techniques in film and psychology and speaking, to the point where you think that you have some sort of illness and debilitation, when it's easy to see that they're just telling you that. It's as easy as telling people, hey, do you get tired at night? Do you get hungry throughout the day? Well, then you probably have this disorder. Ask your doctor if this is right for you. And then they go through a whole prescription list, or a list of what the prescription does to you. And you should ask your doctor instead of you going to your doctor and them telling you if there's something wrong with your biology. That's what they go to school for, not you to tell your doctor. You tell your doctor the symptoms, and they'll decide if it's a problem or not. Sometimes it's just a psychological problem. That is the reason why there's people that are hypochondriacs. They think that they have extensive chronic disorders. That's what the hypochondriac means. And it's really scary to see the adverse effects of everything that's going on, you know? There's a reason why I took all that programming out of my life. And then the whole list of side effects they tell you, you know, it includes even death, brain hemorrhages, bleeding from the lungs, heart palpitations, creating holes in your intestines. It's like, how is that good? How is that helping any other previous disorder that you might have had? It's not. It's making you worse. So now you are going to be dependent on more medications to fix those problems and so on. It continues and continues. You know, that's what happened to my mother. She had, you know, listened to so many people that she didn't stop the simple things that would have helped, like stop smoking. Instead, she started, you know, taking all these brand new asthma medications and that were trial runs and testing on her, but she signed away and gave them permission to do so. And then she became kind of like a guinea pig, and it just got worse and worse to where it became so disheartening and disturbing in a lot of ways. So I had to cut that TV out of my life, a lot of the media. And then I started seeing the way that people started literally mimicking, you know, artists, and there was no independent thought there. When people come in and they dress and act exactly like the musicians they listen to, you know, I started falling for that. You know, I started dressing like certain people I looked up to and thinking the way they were telling me to, not realizing that it was all just a facade. You know, I love music and I'm never going to give it up, but, you know, there's some artists and stuff that I did give up. There's a lot of habits that I gave up. There's, you know, what movies and shows and all that programming that I gave up. It's like, why should I spend hours and hours of my life giving them money when I'm getting nothing from it? In fact, I'm even paying for it. I'm paying for them to waste my time. It's like, give me something of quality that I can build upon, not keep me stuck down somewhere. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a lot of these younger people become so lazy. They have their phone, so they have their Netflix, they have Google, they have connections to, you know, spend their money on, you know, food every night, when it's like, well, you could be saving a lot more money if you bought food for the week. There's so many things you learn when you're independent. They don't want you to be independent. They want you to be dependent on them. And now you're seeing all these young people doing exactly as they're telling them to, while at the same time they think they're rebelling against the system, when they're doing exactly what the system tells them to do. It really is becoming like a dystopian sci-fi. And the comedy part is, you know, Tim Pool even said, you know, that it's kind of like they're one step away from, you know, spray painting Amazon.com and Walmart on the sides of buildings as if it's a sign of rebellion, when it just shows their subliminal subconscious allegiance to these corporations. At the same time, they're saying, oh, Jeff Bezos is, he needs to step down and stop this monopoly stuff, and Google and all that. Meanwhile, they're liking and leaving positive comments on all these pre-programmed YouTube videos for the corporations like BLM and the COVID and the vaccination from the FDA. They're just promoting all these things, thinking that they're rebelling. They're rebelling, and they're not. They're just doing exactly as they're told to do and programmed like mindless drones. And that's how you know that these people have a psychological edge over all these young generations that have been indoctrinated through their whole entire lives to deal with it. You know, kids that are like less than a year old to 10 years old, and instead of, you know, playing with, you know, physical toys and working their imagination and understanding physics and how things work, they're just stuck looking at an iPad or a tablet or a Windows Surface or a Chromebook and not using their mind. They're being conditioned. You know, go look up the difference between someone interacting with something physical and the way their mind looks when they're watching a TV program or electronic program. It should, ring some bells and be a wake-up call. These people behind me didn't die for no reason. They understood what was going on, and they understood that people with power are just going to try to gain more power, and they're going to have power over you, and they're going to tell you what to do, so they keep their power, and they keep growing in power. It's a really sad state of reality of what's going on right now. I grew up at just the right time to witness all of this happening. And they're not going to get me. I'm going to keep my independent train of thought, and I'm going to keep thinking, and I'm going to keep creating, and I'm going to keep using my imagination, and I'm going to keep, trying to better myself and remain strong and independent. There's a time when it calls for the collective and a time where it calls for independence. And if you don't know when to have those differences, then you're going to be part of the wave that drowns you. And you're just like a wave. You're going to mix in with all the other waves in the ocean and be completely indistinguishable. And you're going to listen to every single breeze the wind tells you to go. And you're going to follow that direction every single time and not realize that you can do anything else. And that's what we're seeing now. So I just wanted to get that out there and talk about how important it is to be independent, how important it is to use your mind and not rely on technology for anything, as convincing as it is. Know when to use it and when not to use it. I love technology, but I use it like a tool, and I use it for the proper means, not for every means and for everything, But anyway, that's this video, and I hope I left some people with something to at least think about or consider, because we're in some really strange times right now, and I love you all, and I hope the best for everybody in the world, and I hope people truly wake up and stop being woke, because if they have you speaking like an idiot, you'll remain like an idiot. And if you don't know how to properly use words, or you let them rearrange language on you, then it's going to affect the way you think. So I'll leave it at that, and have an awesome day, have an awesome week. I love all of you. I hope success for everybody. I wish you all well, to you and your families, and hope you have an awesome future. So take care. Adios.